So what do you? Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Hanging Out with Temi. And Hanging Out with Temi. My name is Temi Ajayi. I've got Prof. Mimi Watts and Deborah Dinkinson. I like Dinkinson. We say, how are you doing, ladies?
Great.
Welcome back, Mimi, back to the country. I just could not catch up with this woman. But anyway, you just have to give it to Mimi. Just give it to her. It's amazing. You were in my country. I haven't been for so long. You stayed in Benin City, went to all the museums and everything. But welcome back. And England and this, I lost track, by the way.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to do what I had to do and to do what I do have to do. And it provides me an opportunity to engage, learn, share, but also, bring it back, have some good energy. It's been wonderful. As I said, being in 4 continents within in the last 3 weeks has been, and in between, it's the teaching semester for us as well. So keeping up with my research students, but also keeping up with my lectures. We do get there. That's part of it. That's what we sign up for and give it to a lady. We will do it. We'll get it done.
I don't know if, I've tested a little bit of training. I train nursing students, Division 2, Division 1, or I take them on clinical placement. I love to train. I can train easy, but when you are generating the report or when you are doing the assessment, oh my gosh, I believe Deborah has done a fair bit of that. I don't want to do that. I want somebody else to do it. But as a lecturer, you're going to have to continually doing this. And it doesn't get better because every student is unique and is an entity. So you got to tailor your training and your report and assessment even, and support that you even give to them. Amazing. The teachers, I salute you. The lecturers is a lot of work, but we can't live a life without you guys. Well done.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I don't see it sometimes as a chore because I'm passionate about books and things like that. But I'm also, I've just been fortunate, I guess, the last 5 years or so. I teach primarily the masters, then I've got PhD. So the master's students are different, but yes, every student, every assessment is unique. You have to give them individual, independent feedback, and that focus needs to be there. And but you also know they're mature age students most often than not. So they're there for a purpose. So they're engaged. So like I have got some cohorts of students in health policy, another cohort in contemporary health issues. And I can tell you, they are some of the best students because they work, they have families, and I have students that I can tell you last semester, this semester, they've never missed a single class.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seriously, it makes life easier when it's like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for what you do. My friend Deborah Dinkinson, we've been together today. It was like in and out and rush, crazy. How has your day been afterwards?
It's been good. Like you say, today was like just chop, chop, chop. Had to be here, be there, do this, do that. But it was fun. So, and afterwards we just come home, reassess. But then before you know it, it's like, the other half of what we do, get dinner on the table, get everybody sorted, and get all that done before we get back to things like this. So it just keeps the day turning in every direction. As women, this is what we do. There's this professional side, there's this mum side, we do all those things and we do it well.
Oh, thank you for hearing. Sometimes you got to hear that we do it well. We really, really try our best. I'm only just coming back from funeral. After I left you, Deborah, today I went to funeral. So we got a gentleman in our community that had a fall in front of his house, parked his car, and wanted to cross over to his house, and he fell and he got ran over, and it was so. I don't know, my eyes are sore, looking at the children and the wife. It wasn't anything to behold. And also I lost another friend in Nigeria that was at a Thanksgiving for his wife's 60th. He was in the church. I don't know if you've seen it, holding microphone, thanking God for his wife, slumped and died.
Oh,
So
wow.
quite a lot of issues that have
Condolences.
it's unbelievable. I just want to also use this opportunity to say to people to appreciate people around them, appreciate the time that you have with them. You don't know the next minute. Next minute, these people were not sick. Few minutes before they went sick, and this incident happened. But I just pray that his soul rest in peace, and the children, they will not have after effect trauma of any sort, that God will hold them both home and in here. We sustain and anchor those children. And these one's children are amazing. Listen to 15-year-old speak. I want to say one point that one of them said. He said, it hurts badly for sure, but that there are people that never even met their parents, and they never that he was very privileged to have met the father for the years that they spent together. For a little kid to say that, amazing. Because I had an auntie that was during childbirth, died in the labor room, but the child is 40 years old now, thereabout, and she's doing well. So really, let us just celebrate each other, let us forgive each other, and let us move on with life. Life is very short. But anyway, I'm gonna leave there, but because tonight's topic is actually also relevant to what we're talking about. So how about we go on a quick break and we'll come back. We'll be back. Welcome back on the show. And tonight we've got a topic that is very topical: aging away from harm. The first question I got is: would you stay or would you go? Would you stay home or would you go to, for example, a nursing home? I actually don't think it's something that we can control. Because I know a friend of mine, one of the kids was about 10 years old. And he said, Dad, when you grow older, I will keep you in my house. I'll look after you. And the boy got to about 18 years and he says, Dad, whatever I promised you when I was little, I changed my mind. I cannot have you in my house. You're going to traumatize my kids because you're going to go ugly and whatever. It sounds funny, but the boy said, and it's true. It's a lot of burden and a lot of things to put on our children, especially in diaspora. But Professor Mimi is written a lot. He's done a lot of interviews, which I saw on your LinkedIn. You've been interviewing the people, you spend time to put all these things together. So we thought, let us come and listen and tear it apart, in my own opinion and Deborah's opinion. But Deborah, the question is, would you go to nursing home? Do you have a control over that?
Actually, in our culture, we actually have a system. So it's very much about tikanga, mahatanga. So culturally, we stay in our homes.
Wow.
So actually, the cultural awareness in the health system was modelled off a New Zealand model put in place.
What? Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So cultural awareness in aging, in healthcare, was put in New Zealand, and here in Australia. Well, I know here in Australia, part of it was modelled from it. But it's very culturally driven in aged care. So it is a very, very last resort to send our elderly into aged care.
I've done aged care for over 20 years, and I actually haven't seen any, uh, people from New Zealand there in the nursing home. In fairness, now that you're saying it, but I forgot, I'm not actually sure. Wow, there you go. But Professor Mimi, would
Yes.
you stay home? Do you have a choice of where you go?
Um, well, let me start by setting the context of the paper and the
Right.
title being Aging Away from Home, a Cultural Context and Workforce Challenges for African Australians, and the
Mm,
necessity for an Afrocentric care model in Australia. And the
mhm.
context, aging away from home, first aging away from Africa
Mm.
into a new home, which is Australia. And then
Okay.
within the Australian context, some people staying in their houses where they live now, and others maybe moving into residential care. So
Mhm.
it's almost like double moving away from home.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
So
Okay. Well, when you move away from your home country and you come here, I think it's a different cup of tea altogether, because here, sometimes the hospital could veto you have to go to nursing home. The doctor can veto it and say you're going. Your children most likely might say you're going. So I think we should be looking at nursing home per se. But I would let you, um, shine light into what you're talking about, understanding the cultural context.
yeah, so what informed the paper literally has been, speaking to people, but also just really having the observation. And I think one of the things that travel gives to somebody like me is I've got an analytic mind and I'm continuously assessing situation and analyzing stuff.
Mm,
And in this context around aging, when you just take a step back, if you look at who migrated to Australia from the African continent
mm,
30 years ago, and if those people were in their 20s, they are now in their late 50s and in their 60s.
Mm.
So
Mm.
literally they're taking the box of the elders, right? Those that
I
migrated
almost,
maybe
sorry, I almost, but I'm not eldest.
you look at those people who migrated 40 years ago.
Yeah.
If they were in their 20s, they're above 60. If they were in their 30s, they're getting to the 70s,
Yeah.
etc. And then if you look at those that migrated 20 years ago, if
Mm,
they came in their 20s, they're in their 40s. If
yeah.
they came in their 30s, they're in their 50s. Hence, we are seeing a shift in the population and the dynamics of who is a member of the African Australian community, which historically was a very young population, but we are increasingly seeing people hitting that 60, 70, and closer to 80 mark. It doesn't mean that Africans have not been here that are older, but I'm talking about the critical mass in terms of numbers. And hence, we're looking at the wave of the Ethiopians, the Somalians, and then, of course, the skilled migrants and the other population groups that then came in the 2000s. So, looking at those population groups. And
Mhm.
when you think about the African context in terms of aging, normally there's intergenerational living. But even in Africa, that is shifting as well. Why? Because you've got children. And if we think about most of us here, if we lived within the continent, our mothers, our fathers, or others will live with us in one way or the other. If most often are not parents of a certain age, they rotate between their children in different cities, or maybe they all live in one town and there's a frequent visit. So there's a gap in that back home in the countries, but also there's a gap here because intergenerational living benefited grandchildren
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
terms of the wisdom, in terms of free childcare, but really just the relationship and the emotional intelligence, the mental health support, and you had the systems in place. That has shifted significantly. So you have children who are growing up, they don't know their grandparents, they don't understand those social and those support systems generally if they don't have the family members here. And most often than not, I would say at least 80-90% of African people here, the children don't have their grandparents here. That is a fact. And
Yes.
maybe it could be higher, especially people that migrated here as professionals in their 20s, in their 30s. They did not bring their parents. So their children have grown up with that gap, not knowing what those family structural networks are.
That's
So when
true.
you, yeah, so when you look at that co-residency that historically was there, it is no longer there. If you look at that intergenerational living that was there, it is no longer there. But then you then take a step back and you also look at some of the people who then migrated during those periods. If they came in from a country that, for example, English was not their first language and they did not come in with employment, that took them maybe 10 or even longer to maybe master the language and have meaningful employment. And if that person is now in their 60s or 70s, they may have only worked for 10, 15, luckily maybe for 20 years, and
That's
most of them are not in low income professions. So what level or what amount of superannuation have they accumulated during
right.
that period of time? And our
Yeah.
superannuation has direct correlation to our retirement status and retirement funds available to you. So as a result, we have
Yeah.
multiple gaps of a minority elderly population group that is now emerging within an already minority group. And these are some of the challenges that we need to really start thinking about. How do we have a workforce that is going to help us address these issues, whether they live at home or whether they go into a care facility?
Okay, so what problem is it gonna create if they live at home? I think if you accept them to live with you, like Deborah said, that's not an issue then. So my issue when I was looking at that is them living outside of the home. I say this to say, if, for example, you're able to allow your parents to stay home, that means you have the cognizance of the importance of the family. And you're talking about people from maybe age 40, 50 upward, not 20, not like the people, somebody that uh what am I going to say? Not 20, not younger people, because younger people, children that are born in Australia, for example, second generation, third generation, I don't think they have the same values, so to say, as us. And that is why I said fair enough, because I don't think they're going to inconvenience themselves. I don't think they're going to say the best thing for you. However, they will actually think is the best thing for them to go to a home where they will be looked after 24/7. If our children can't do something with all their heart, they're not going to try. But we will do it. We will do it. We will put everything as aside. We will suffer whatever to give them the best, because we thought they're giving us the best. That is us. So when you were saying, also I picked on your research or your
Yeah,
writing, you
yeah,
talked about that the diaspora diversity, that they should
yeah,
recognize or acknowledge the heterogeneity within the African Australian community. And then you said something like the horns of Africa versus West Africa versus South, and that they should do all these things together, but avoid one size fits all. Can you please explain what that means? Like,
Yes, thanks for that and picking some up on something like that. When we talk about heterogeneity, it's really about the diversity within a much larger group. And this is because there are certain cultural nuances that are similar across the different groups. However, there's also a lot of diversity. For example, in terms of food culture, in terms of how people behave, in terms of how people interact, right? And when you travel, for example, you are in a place like Ethiopia, for example, one of the wonderful things that I have seen, it is how quiet the men can be when they speak to each other. It is something that you need to be there and you experience it. And I have been in situations where two males can sit on a chair next to each other, and you sit directly opposite them, and you're not even hear what they are saying. They're almost whispering. So there's a type of a gentleness in terms of their approach, etc., in terms of doing things. But there are also cultural foods, for example, that, for example, in Ethiopia, regardless of what part of the country most people eat injera. It's almost like a national staple. But that is not the case. For example, if I'm in Nigeria, based on the region, based on where I am, there are so many types of foods that you're going to be eating.
Yeah.
So somebody who is coming from Nigeria, for example, we need to think about the food groups. Somebody who is coming from Cameroon, we need to think about the foods. Somebody who is coming from Kenya or Southern Africa, etc. So that diversity, that heterogeneity is really important, that we don't just lump people in one group and say, oh, they are African, so there is the same expectations. The music, we need to think about, take those considerations. Does that mean that every home, every individual, everything has to be tailored into for each group? Absolutely not. But we need to take into we have to take into consideration perhaps the importance of the diversity and the experiences that these people will bring with them. But also aging across the different cultures is different. And you've highlighted it, for example, when it comes to children. We have to think about our world exposure. People are normally shaped by their worldviews. They're normally shaped by their exposures. And if children have not been exposed to intergenerational living, to co-residency, it will be something that it will be difficult for them to take on. Whereas when you've grown up in a community where this is the norm, and there is a big lament, and there are some references that I have here, and there are some papers that were actually written from Nigeria, and there is some research that has been done with migrants in the Horn of Africa, in Europe as well. And when you look at some of the challenges in these communities, but also looking at some of the Southeast Asian communities, there are lots of similarities in terms of co-residency, but there are also a lot of differences. And something that I also want to really highlight is that not every older person wants to age with their children, be it in Africa, be it in Australia. However, when you look at some of the studies that have been conducted with Mexicans and other Latinos in America, in the USA, one of the nuances were they wanted to live on their own, but they did not have the financial resources. Hence, co-residency becomes an important element to take into consideration. But we know, and one of the key things I really want to highlight is that we need to look at the benefits of co-residency. Having your mom and dad live with you, whether it is in a granny flat, you've got free childcare, you've got the free pastor, you've got the free counselor, you've got the free peacemaker, you've got, and it is all there in that paper. It's a package, right? It is beneficial for the children. It is beneficial for the older adults. It can be sometimes challenging for the child who is a child of the grandparents, but also a parent of the younger children. But most often I know you've got free childcare, and most often I know you have a cook at home for somebody that you don't have to worry. Michelle Obama's mother was a classic example where that was a safety space, that co-residency, when she moved into the White House to live with her grandchildren and her daughter. Hence, Michelle was in that space where she was the daughter of the grandparent, but she was a parent of two daughters. But with the busy schedule, she always had the peace of mind that there was a parent at home that had an oversight over the children, because it can be a very difficult space. And I think that's an example that if the First Lady of the USA can follow the African tradition 5-6 generations later in the White House, what more about any of us and all of us in this room?
I will let Deborah speak to this. I'm laughing because I have. I'll talk about my friend's experience with parents shortly, but I'll let Deborah go.
Yeah, look, everything that that I'm hearing, it takes me straight back to my culture, and I'm looking at it through two different lenses. So before I moved to Australia, being back in New Zealand, amongst our culture, and we were very much that. I had my grandparents on both sides, not far from me, aunties and uncles. So we lived in this community, and it's like this hierarchy. You, as a child, it's not something you think about, looking after your parents when that time comes around. But through the hierarchy, that's naturally taking place. And now here, moving to Australia, being very much outside that, away from that intergenerational living. It was still very much part of what I did. Now, you know, my children are much older. My grandchildren, are there, but so we get together as much as we can. But through how we communicate, it is still under that banner of living in the one community, even though we're states apart from each other. So in the beginning, first moving to Australia, was looking after my parents top of mind? No, it wasn't. But as I got older and as my father needed me, it became very much top of mind, and therefore, just naturally fell back into the way that the tikanga ways of our Māori upbringing, and we actually moved back to New Zealand for 4 months for me to look after him. And then once he was better, because he was going through cancer at the time, we actually had him come and live with us here in Australia for a couple of months, and then we'd send him back home because he needed home.
Right.
Living in Australia outside of his own surroundings was great when he needed us, but for his own essence and mental health, he needed to be home. So that's what we did. Was he lived between both of us, but there came a time where he knew his time was coming, so his being at home was the best thing for him. So now it was up to us to travel, and my sister stepped in to look after him at that point. So for us, moving away from our homeland, it's there. But yes, we lose a lot of that intergenerational. I mean, the things that I learned that were so just at my fingertips, living with my grandparents, I so much took for granted. But when you move away from that, you realize those things and you start to grab onto them more. So yes, it's been quite an interesting discussion to have to really recap on that, looking through both lenses, in your homeland, outside of your homeland, and what does that mean? Because I know for me, when it comes to that part of my life, we would move back to New Zealand so that I would be back home. Because one of the things that my father said, and I know many of our elderly do, because they have lots of whānau here in New Zealand, they say, "Don't let me die here."
Wow.
So we take them home before that. And look, there was something else you touched on, Professor Mimi, which is about the ages, right? So how old we are when we first came here, or, and that 30, 40, 50 years later, how things are very different. So, for example, my children only know, I mean, they very much know their homeland, but really they've only been here in Australia. Their life has been here in Australia.
They all exist.
Yeah, so for them and for many of our generations, they're buried here in Australia, or whereas before it didn't matter if you did die here, you would be taken back to your homeland. Now, because we are more and more Australian, marrying Australians, their family units are here. So therefore, for them to be buried or cremated, it changes the landscape of our tradition. But the tradition has had to evolve with that through a lot of heartache, but the tradition has evolved through that. So yeah, times change, and it really reflects back on the traditions of our cultures.
So on that note, that's really interesting in terms of the perspective and when people change. And if you reflect back, I would say anybody who is in this room who migrated 20 years ago, if you look back, when you migrated, you had different objectives in life. Most often than not, it was about career opportunities. It was about growth. Some people migrated because they had a partner who was living in Australia, so they migrated to join that person. There was little about your parents, because your parents, most often than not, were at the age that you are at the moment, or close
Yes,
to
yes,
the age that you are at the moment. Hence, there was little thought about support systems and everything. Everybody was strong, everybody was healthy. Then,
Yeah.
as you get older yourself, when you're approaching your 40s, your 50s, most often you're not. Your parents are 30, 25, 30 years or a little bit older
mm,
than you. So if,
yes,
let's say, if you migrated at age of 25, right? And then 25 years later you're 50, and your mother was maybe 25 years older, she's now 75 or
yes,
approaching or
yes,
older, most often than not.
Mm.
It's a very different space,
yes,
personally, professionally, but also your level of maturity and perspective and what is
yeah,
relevant, and this is where wisdom comes in. Hence, you start asking yourself what really matters in life. Whereas
Mm.
when you think about the young people, just like you and I, when we migrated, that is where they are at this moment in
mm,
time. Hence, that is where they see the world. And it is therefore up to us to help them in terms of what does it mean to age in another land. Because this paper, the focus is for African Australians aging outside of the African
yes,
continent.
yes,
Where will
mm,
you be buried? And that is a challenge that people
mm,
are beginning to worry about. I went to the UK recently for my brother cousin's funeral. And of course, he was repatriated back. Had a big funeral, over 600 participants in the UK, and then the different whatever they did, home, etc. While he was young, there were certain things still that it was important to take him back to where his mother and father rested, etc. in Cameroon. That was essential, even though all his children, but for one, were born in the UK, and they did understand that. So I think this is about really how do I put it? Really having these difficult
yes,
conversations with
yes,
our children, with our families, what we want. And lots of people don't talk about death. It's not a
yes,
conversation that we have in our community until if one of us is directly affected. So these are the hard conversations we must begin having. If you're above 50, it's a conversation that you should have. So for me, really thinking about some of those things, but really looking at what is out there, I think it is essential that we have an Afrocentric model that is therefore going to prepare people. Whether you are living at home, which is the type of choice, I think people live longer when they live in their own houses rather than
mm,
care facility. But we have to also equip people with the knowledge and the resources to take care of those residents. And the evidence is clear. When you have people who come from a particular cultural background being cared for by people from a similar cultural background, there are benefits to the
Yeah.
carer, but also to the
mm,
person being cared for. Right?
mm,
So there are benefits, and this is where we can start thinking about pairing individuals. Is it going to be possible to pair everybody from somebody from the same country? Not necessarily. It's not going to be possible, but we
mm,
can have acculturation education and support
yes,
systems that will bring that as close to that individual as possible. Should they be cared at home in their family home, or should they be cared in a facility? But it's really important that we have this conversation, being mindful that we have a generation that don't understand what Africa looks like. We have a
mm,
generation that did not have those experiences of having the grandmother. I had my two great grandmothers, so
mm,
not my grandma, but my two great grandmothers live with us until probably when I was 3 or 4, 5 years old. So I have a very good memory of them because they died much later when I was in primary school. One of my great grandmothers died when I was in primary school, and then the other one passed away when I was in secondary school. So I know what it meant, but they visited when my mom had the baby. But then we also visited them almost on a weekly basis on Sunday because my mom made sure that we had to take food to her grandmother. And yeah, so there are certain things that you value as a child. It really was just something that I did. But as I've gotten older, I understand what it meant to come and sit there and your great grandmother pulls you aside and give you that little lolly or God knows whatever, and that word in your ear, it stays with you, it shapes you, it molds you, it makes you the individual that you are. We should
mm,
impart that on our children.
mm.
I
The
I really, really love this topic. And it's a lot, like I said to it. You had 5 points on your LinkedIn page. We've only just addressed two. We haven't even finished the second one because I looked at the whole thing very thoroughly. Um, but I really like the Maori culture. I really, these people who have this culture, they respect the culture, they hold on to the culture. I wonder what culture we have in Nigeria. I really, really do wonder. I think the issues we have is too much knowledge, too much knowing, and carefree. We are so carefree. Our parents gave us too much free hands, and I think we took it for granted. However, they don't want to come here anyway, it's too far. So this aging thing you're talking about, Mimi, it's us because our parents aren't coming. They told us they don't want to come. Even if you put me in a first class, give me 1 million, I'm not going. It's too far. I will only come once, and I'm not coming back again. So definitely they're not aging here. The people that are aging are you and I. But what I want to say also is this aging, sometimes you put into consideration health. Health can deteriorate. We can have illness. There could be disability that you have to put people in a supported environment or even in a home. There's a whole lot. And I think as I am, if I have disability, put me in a home, but just give me my food, right? Make sure you give me rice, or give me fufu or something like that. I will be fine. And so we're talking about us, but I think time is not on our side. We ran out of time because, as I'm telling you, after this meeting tonight, we're heading off to another thing, as you can imagine. But Mimi, I need to start from this respect. It's still the diaspora that I still need to talk about. Talk about respect. There's a whole lot, and I've got a lot
Yeah.
of instances I want to talk to you about. So this Afrocentric thing that you want to do, God help us. I don't know
Yeah.
how far or how well. But until now, we have to stop. Unfortunately, half an hour is not enough, but it makes it juicy because next time we're going to continue on this particular topic. So far, let us know what you think. If you've got any point, let us know because then we'll be able to talk about it next week. Do you have any last minute talk? We are run out of time, like I said, guys. Ladies, did you want to say anything before we say goodbye?
Um, Deb, you want to go first?
Look, I think I'd just like to say for those that are listening, um, it's something we need to be thinking about. It's something that needs to be top of mind, especially if you're in your 50s and upwards. Don't be afraid of the conversation. My father's unveiling is next year in New Zealand, and for me and my siblings, we have decided that we will tell our children what we want, what our wishes are for when we pass. Now, it's a conversation that some of our children don't want to have, but we have to have it.
They don't want it, they told me.
Yeah.
So thank you for that as well. I guess when you look at where we are as a community and as a society, there are already a lot of existing challenges, but there are also a lot of success stories. Hence, we need to impart the values that we brought with us. I think some of the things that people tend to see is look at the fringes of Western culture. Western people most often are not really aged at home. The family stay together. People look after their parents, which is contrary to what they say they're all in nursing homes. It's a very small percentage that is in nursing homes, less than 10%, I would think so. And I'll have to look at it. Yeah, absolutely. Most people age at home, and most influential people die at home. Think about most of the influential people that you ever know. They don't go to a nursing home. So we need to just rethink this. We need to impart this because we need to live and work as a generation. And also, we tend to not have individual names, we tend to have generational names if you want to create legacies. It's not an individual, it is families, it is structures. And the African cultural values, societal values, provide us with that. We must build on them. We must strengthen those values, impart them on our children, but really value where we come from, value our roots. And I hope that as we dissect this topic, go and read the full paper. It is published in Public Health Frontiers, one of a very, impactful journal. And so I'm here to answer your private questions as well.
Oh, there's a whole lot of questions that I've got. I haven't even asked you one. It's very complicated to me, considering my background. But anyway, until then, we have to say goodbye for now. See you again next week. Ta-ta.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye for now.